Hey, what's up guys? In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use the masking tool in Lightroom Classic. So before we get started, we need to understand what is masking. Right now I have a photo in front of me of a temple or inside of a temple of the corridor in Angkor Wat. And let's say, for example, I want to increase or brighten this area of the ceiling. What I can do is I can increase the shadows and brighten it up. And it definitely brightens up the shadows in the ceiling, but it also brightens up the shadows on the side here and this bottom right corner. So I'm going to reset that. So what I need to do is I need to increase the shadows or brighten up this area specifically. So I need to target it. And the way I target it is by creating a mask. And the way I create a mask is clicking on the masking tool right here or pressing Shift+W keyboard shortcut. And then I'm going to paint over this with a brush. So these are the defaults for the brush right now. We'll talk about the brush in a minute. But I'm going to paint over or select this area right now. And I'm going to paint over it. And the red overlay is the mask or the area that's going to be impacted by the adjustments made to the mask. And I just painted over it. And now I'm going to increase the shadows. Now, as you can see, as I'm sliding the shadow slider, I am increasing the shadows or brightening it up on the ceiling and not impacting the rest of the image. So you also need to understand that these tools right here are specifically for the mask. It's a little bit separate from the basic panel because the basic panel affects everything. So just remember, the masking tool has its own sliders. Now we'll discuss the masking brush, the tool that I have right here that I painted the ceiling with. So in Lightroom, you can create two brushes or two default brushes, the A and the B. Then you can change the size of the brush by using the size slider. You can also press the keyboard shortcuts left square bracket or right square bracket to change the sizes. For the feather is the transition of the brush. So the lower or zero feather will give it a hard transition or no transition at all. And a feather of 100 will give it a more smoother transition. So I'm going to demonstrate the example for you by just resetting this image, clicking on the brush, decreasing the exposure, and I'll decrease the shadows, the blacks. I'll just decrease everything. So I'm going to paint it with black, or at least give you the impression. So right now the feather is at 100. I'm going to decrease the size a little bit. I'm going to paint over this area right here. So you can see the side here, it's a little bit smoother. The transition goes from 100% black and then it smoothes out a little bit here. If I change the feather to 0, it makes the transition very hard. So majority of the time, depending on what you're masking, you probably want a 100 feather, but when you're doing fine details, you may need to mask with 0. So I'm just going to reset that and go back to the brush. And now one of the most important tools to understand in the brush or the masking tool is the flow and density. So the density is similar to the opacity. So this will be like the maximum effect of your brush. So give me 1 second here. Let me go back to this. So if I go to the flow and I go to the flow of 50, what flow does is you need to paint over this twice. So paint over this area twice because it's at 50. So if I paint over this twice, this is 50 of 100. And if I paint over it again, now it's 100. So now the entire density is 100. So at a flow of 50, the flow of 50, what it does is it impacts the stroke. So right now, this is one stroke at 50, and this is another stroke at 50, which equates to 100. But if I do the density at 50 and keep the flow at 50, what's going to happen is it's going to be similar to 25% the flow, and then I can paint over it again. And this is the maximum flow and density that I can get. The darkest it'll get is 50. If I wanted to get it 100% dark, I need to get it to 100. And then again, if I keep that 25 the flow, I need to brush over this area once for 25, another again, 2 for 50, another again for 75, another once again for 100. So with the flow is the value or the percentage of the impact of the stroke. And the density is the maximum amount, or like the opacity that the mask will apply. So now I'm going to show you how the auto mask tool works. So let's say, for example, I want to paint or mask this edge right here and decrease the highlights. One thing I can do is, without the auto mask, I can paint over this area. But if I paint over this area, even with a feather of 0 or 100, I'm going to have a hard time getting the edges right here. So let me just zoom in right now. So another thing I can do is I can also erase here. I can click on this erase tool and let me see and select a decent brush. Decrease the feather. And another way of selecting the erase tool is just by pressing the Option or Alt key and holding it, and then that'll activate the erase tool. So I can correct this by using the erase tool and make the edges a little bit more refined. And then I can also paint over this area. Make sure I decrease the feather. Paint over this. And you can see I can do a decent job by using the active brush as well as the erase tool, and then I can start erasing the edges. But to make this area or select this area more easier and decrease the highlights, the best thing to do is use auto mask. Now let me just reset this and let me select a brush, click on auto mask. What auto mask does is it automatically detects the edges and tries to make a better selection on your mask. So right now I'll keep the feather at around something really low, actually around 10. And you want to paint over this area and paint over the area that you want to have selected. It's okay if the brush goes a little bit over the edge. Usually what Lightroom does with the auto mask is it selects the area or paints the area that the plus sign on the brush is. So you can still go over it, and then you can go like this, and then like that. Just keep brushing away. That looks good. And now sometimes when you need to brush on the interior, what you can do is deselect auto mask and paint over it. Just like that. That looks pretty good. Whoops, I went over here, so I'll press Alt or Option and clean it up a little bit. And now you can see with auto mask, the edges of the mask is selected better, and now I can decrease the highlights. So that was pretty easy. Or I can decrease the whites, or even darken it up a little bit. So that's how auto mask works. This is for more refined selections, and it's really good if you're having an image with hard edges for masking. So like this area here, or if I wanted to select the door, I would use auto mask. So there are a few ways to view the overlay on your mask. So let me just activate the mask overlay. And the default overlay is usually red, and that's also common in Photoshop and other photography software. You can change the color if you want. You can change it to green or whatever color you like, but usually red is the industry standard. And there's also other overlay options such as color overlay on black and white. This looks pretty good, but may not be really effective on all types of images. Then image on black and white does not look good at all, just because this image or this selected area is very desaturated. Then the image on black, this looks pretty decent. And image on white, and then image on black. So the most common overlays people use is the color overlay and the white on black. But color overlay on black and white looks pretty good. And if you want to add to an overlay, usually white on black looks pretty good for correcting an image mask. If you're subtracting or adding, so you can add or subtract as well. So with masking in Lightroom Classic, you can add or subtract from a mask as well as intersect them. We'll talk about intersecting masks later, but with this mask selected right now, if I want to add to it, I can just simply paint over it, and voila, that makes it pretty easy. But I can also select or create another mask. So I'll create a new mask here, select the brush tool, which we've been learning, and then I can paint over and select the ceiling here. And then I will increase the shadows of the ceiling. Go back to the mask. And what I'll do is I will rename it. I'll rename it to ceiling. And also with this mask or this mask layers panel, I can move it around. And I can also change the size if I want to. Or I can dock it somewhere else, just like that. But Usually here it looks pretty good. And with the masking tool, you can also select different type of brushes. So this is the brush one that I have right now. Let me go and turn on this overlay. I can select another brush. And with this brush, let's say I want to create a hard feather and I want to paint over it differently. And let's say I want to paint over this area here. So this will be brush 2, which has a different opacity or density and flow. So if we go to the black and white on the mask, you'll see it looks a little bit different. It's almost gray as well. Compared to this area, it's white. So that's a few ways you can play around with the mask or add to the mask. You can add it directly just by brushing it, or you can create a new mask and do selective editing. So now I'm going to do black and white selective color photography using the color range mask in Lightroom Classic. It's an awesome way or a cool way to make a color pop out or stand out. And make sure to check out my Instagram profile, link in the description, because I do a lot of selective color photography. Anyways, I'm going to select the color range mask here, and then I need to sample an area of the fabric or the piece of the cloth that I want to pop out, or the color. In this case, it's this orange or reddish orange. And I'm going to select it. I'm going to decrease this blacks here, have the overlay or automatically on. And you can see the color range or the sample color I selected. I'm going to sample around, get a better orange looking color if I can. And you can see the mask changing as I'm sampling. And let me see here, that looks good. This is a better orange color that I noticed on my screen. And then I can refine the mask or make it more sharp like this. So I'm going to increase the mask a little bit, and it's going to broaden the area or the color range, as in this case. So I'm going to maximize it as much as I can before I go a little bit overboard with the background selections. So that looks good. So now I want to clean up this mask. So I want to remove all of this area. So I'm going to click on subtract. I'm going to click on the brush. This default brush looks good. The feather, keep on 25. And I'll just brush away this area here. I'll brush this away as well. Brush this away. It doesn't have to be perfect, but as close as you can get it is good. I'll zoom in a bit. And that looks good. That looks good. And that looks better. So now I'll turn off the overlay. And yeah, so now I want to create another mask by just selecting the background. So I'll duplicate this mask, duplicate, and invert mask. So let me rename this as, let me just name it as BW for black and white. That looks good. Turn off the overlay. So now I have this mask here. So what I'm going to do is desaturate it, turn it black and white. And now I'm going back to this color range. Actually, this mask 1. So I have this area selected. Turn off the overlay. And now I'm going to make this area pop a little bit more. So what I can do is increase the saturation. So that looks pretty good. I can mess with the hue if I want. That looks alright. Let's see the before and after. Let me see what happens when I just go overboard with the saturation. So that looks alright. And now to make these final adjustments to make the color pop, you need to add a little bit of contrast. So I need to go to the basic panel, add a little bit of contrast, and then I'm going to add a little bit of texture and clarity. So now you can see how this image looks amazing or is popping out with the color range mask. And if I want, I can make the mask a little bit better by going here and then selecting this brush and decreasing the size, and then I can just paint over more of the area here, get this dark area as well as here. It's a better thing if I zoom in and brush as well here. Go here. That doesn't look good. Let me clean up that stroke. So that's another way of doing color range. And remember what I showed you guys earlier. I can do the auto mask. and then it'll improve the area a little bit more, and it'll be easier without using a feather. So paint over here, that looks good. And now I can increase the size here, zoom in a little bit. This brush is probably really big right now. Make sure I select it. There's the brush. Now I can paint over this area and select it. I'm not too worried about this area that shouldn't be selected. Brush here. And that looks good. So anyways, if you want to further refine it, you can do it with the auto mask or remove the auto mask depending on how much help you need. So now the selection looks a little bit better. And one thing I want to do is actually decrease the saturation. And I want to go to the effects panel, put a little bit of vignette, go to the tone curve tool, and increase the midtones. So now the image looks really cool. Let's see the before and after. Before and after. And that's mainly using the color range tool. And once again, if you need to refine it, you can use the brush tool right here to refine it. These two brushes of addition and subtraction. So with this selective color black and white photo, I want to make a few more adjustments, mainly the highlighted areas right here. I want to darken it. One way I can do it is just by using the brush tool. But another way to do it is using the Luminance tool or the Luminance mask. And I'm going to create a new Luminance mask right now. So I'll go to create new mask. I'm going to go to Luminance mask. But for color range, it masks or selects a color, but Luminance selects bright values or dark values depending on how you use it. So I'm going to click on the Luminance Range, and then I'm going to select this bright value with this eyedropper tool. So I'm going to select it. And now you can see the area that's been selected once I hover over it. Let me turn on the overlay right now. And then I can refine this luminance range. I can change the transition or the softness or a little bit of the feather of the luminance. And then I can select this area right here, the absolute value that it should for sure select. But anyways, I'm going to select it about here, change the transition area about here. So now you can see it selected this area right now, and I want to click on this mask too, and then I want to subtract, go back to the brush tool, increase the feather, increase the size a bit, and then I want to brush away this area right now, turn off auto mask, and just brush this area here, and brush this area here. I want to keep this entrance, so I will brush over there, paint it away. And right here. So this area is the area that I want to decrease or reduce the highlights. So let me turn off the overlay. And now I'm still on this mask too. And then I'm going to go to the highlights and decrease the highlights. So you can see the highlights decreasing right here as well as here. And maybe, let me see if I should change the white point. Okay, so that looks good. So let's see the before and after in mask 2. So depending on how you look at it, it might be better this is off. This highlight area gives a little bit of more of a feeling or aesthetic look. But anyways, I wanted to demonstrate the Luminance Range mask, and that's how you use it. So now I'm going to clean up this overblown sky using the gradient tools. First, I'm going to start with the Radial Gradient, which makes a circle. So you can see on my mouse, there's like a plus sign, and I have to click with the mouse, hold it, and drag it to make this gradient tool, or this gradient mask. And if I want to make a perfect circle, I have to shift and hold, or I can just freely move it around and change the shape to an oval shape if I want. And then I click here, and then I can move it, and I want to move it right here. And now I'm going to reset these sliders, and I'm going to change the size of this gradient tool, or the Radial Gradient tool. And I can also impact the filter, or I can impact the feather by dragging this. Here's the feather tool. And I can change the size. I'm going to change the overlay and remove it. And this looks pretty good. This is the area I want to impact. And that looks good. So now I'm going to clean up the sky a little bit, decrease the highlights, maybe decrease the whites a bit, increase the saturation. So right now I'm only impacting this area, and I'm going to drop down a little bit. Let's see what I can do with the tone curve, decrease it a little bit, add a little bit of clarity, and add a little bit dehaze. So let's see the before and after. So the before and after, you can see it impacted the sky really well, but it also impacted the foreground or these statues. Let's take a look at the mask. So in order to correct that, I can subtract, I can go to Luminance Range, I can select the mask or the statue here, and then I can select a dark area. Let's turn on the overlay, and that looks pretty good. Now let's go to this mask. So now it looks better. Let's see the before and after. So it's not impacting the statues here in Easter Island as much. Now this area of the sky, I want to clean it up a little bit more, or not clean it up, but just change the color and see what I can do with it. So I'm going to go back to this mask area here. I'm going to create a new mask. And this time, instead of a radial gradient or the circle mask, I'm going to create a linear gradient. And the linear gradient, I'm just going to drag it. I'm going to show you an example. And I'm going to turn on the overlay to show you an example. So I can move around this linear gradient. I can change the size as well as the feather by dragging these up and down. And I can rotate it if I would like. And now I'm going to turn off this overlay. I'm going to turn off this overlay. And this hue is at 30.2, so that's why it's showing that different purple color. I'm going to turn on the overlay and turn it on to color overlay, which will look better. I'm going to rotate this, decrease the feather, and that looks better. So let me turn off the overlay. Now I'm going to play around with the color and the sky in this area, so I can decrease the highlights, decrease the shadows, or maybe just exposure will be a little bit better. Decrease the exposure and change or increase the saturation, mess around with the hue a little bit, add my own touch to it if I want, or I can go overboard. And I think I'll just leave it like that. So let's see the before and after with the gradient or the linear gradient. Here's the before and here's the after. So you can see overall, let me lights out this, hide the overlay. And you can see the before and after with the gradient tools, the linear gradient and the radial gradient. I was able to improve the sky as well as remove this area or subtract this area using the luminance range. Instead of using the linear or radial gradient mask in Lightroom Classic to select the sky or even the subjects using the luminance tool or the luminance mask, I can just use some of these AI tools that Lightroom Classic has. When I first started with Lightroom, none of these tools were available. So if I want to select the sky, I can just click on sky. It'll automatically detect it. Let's see the masks that it created, which it did a pretty good job. And let me change the hue, decrease the highlights, reset the hue, decrease the whites, maybe add a little bit of contrast, decrease the midtones with the tone curve. And now if I want to get the subject or these Moai statues in Easter Island, I can just go back and add a subject mask. So it'll automatically detect the subject. Let's take a look at it. Looks pretty cool, or looks pretty good. And now I can increase the shadows of it if I want. Let me see, I have to reset the blacks here. So I'll increase the highlights, I'll increase the shadows to show it a little bit more. So let's see the before and after of this mask on these statues. So it's showing a little bit more by increasing the shadows, maybe increase the blacks as well. And then I can give it a little bit more texture and clarity. Actually, this is in the basic panel, so you got to be careful. So let me go back to the mask, put some clarity, put some texture, make the mask look a little bit better, or make these statues look a little bit better. And now I'm just going to reset this. Another thing Lightroom Classic has with its masking tools is these subjects. So I can select these two girls. This is a stock photo, so I can select the subject again here. And you can see the mask that it created, and then I can do whatever I want with the lighting adjustments if I want to. I'm just going to reset that, but I want to select the background this time. And now the background selected, so I can decrease the exposure if I want to make them pop out a little bit more, or I can increase the exposure as I wish. So that's how you use these AI tools. They're pretty handy because when I first started using Lightroom Classic and Photoshop, these AI tools were not available. Right now in 2024, it's all about AI now, or almost all about AI, but it definitely saves some time with masking. If you quickly want to mask people in Lightroom Classic, there is a people tool that's available in the masking section, and it automatically detects if there's people in a photo, and you'll be able to select people individually. So for now, I'm just going to select on all people, and then you can select the entire person or just their face, their body or skin or whatsoever. I'll just select their face, facial skin, select their lips, select their teeth. You can see there's an overlay building around them, and I'll select I'll leave the hair off, and then I'll just create the mask. Keep in mind the mask tool for the people, it's pretty similar to the subject tool, depending on if there's photo or if there's people in your photo. So anyways, the mask is created. Let me turn on the overlay, and that's how it looks like. And if I want, I can change the exposure a little bit and do whatever I want with the photo to make the correct lighting adjustments. Sometimes when you use the subject AI mask, it doesn't mask properly. So I'm going to delete this mask right now. And what I want to do is select this tree in front of me and just play around with it. So one thing I can do is click on the objects mask, and then I can click on this paintbrush here, and I can paint over the area that I want masked or that I want the object selected, and Lightroom Classic will detect and automatically select the mask. So it did a pretty good job there. I can undo that as well and click on it again, and instead of painting over it, I can click on this icon here, and then I can create like a square over it. And then I can select it, and as you can see, it did a pretty good job with the mask, and it did a pretty good job with the water here in between some of the leaves. So if I want, I can mess around with this tree now, and that's how you use the object mask with Lightroom Classic. And now I'm going to show you how to use the Intersect tool, or the Intersect of Masks in Lightroom Classic. It's very similar to subtracting from a mask. So let's say in this photo or this portrait, I want to add a radial filter and brighten up this lady here and just give her a little bit of more highlight to the area just around here, but not impact anything below or around or the background. And I want to make the transition a little bit smooth. One thing I can do is use the people tool, but the people tool will not allow me to add a gradient. So what I'm going to do is instead add the radial gradient first. I'll create the mask right here and impact it like this. Let me change the hue, increase the exposure a little bit, increase the highlights, and increase the shadows. So let's see the before and after. Let me hide the overlay, before and after. So it looks a little bit better. But now, as you can see with the mask, it's impacting the background as well. And I don't want the background impacted. So I'm going to turn off this overlay, and I'm going to click on the mask, right click with the mouse, intersect mask with, and I'm going to select people this time. So what it's going to do is I'm going to click on the mask here, and I'm going to select the entire person, and I'm going to create a mask, and it's going to create an intersection like this. So now you can see the background is removed, and only the girl or the woman here is selected, and there's also a soft transition going from here to here with the Radial tool. So that's how the Intersect tool works with the masking in Lightroom Classic. And if you guys enjoyed this tutorial of masking in Lightroom Classic, give it a like, subscribe, and follow me on Instagram. And always live easy, sleep breezy, and stay lovely. Have a good one, guys.